What is up, everybody? Sysadmin Sean here, and today we are going to be talking about our third part in the employment guidebook, general tips and tricks to getting a job as a sysadmin, or really any job in the IT field. So we've searched out our jobs, we figured out what we want to do, we've built our resume, we've now been called to do an interview. So what do you need to do? The first thing you need to do is make sure you have a suit. Now, sometimes places will say, oh, it's a business casual interview, then a polo shirt and khakis is fine. But it's really a good idea to always have a suit. Really, it's a good idea to have two suits. And of course, dress shirts and ties and things like that. You might be thinking, that's really expensive. Suits are not cheap. And that's true. Suits are not cheap. But if you go to Goodwill, if you really just need a suit for an interview and you think that's the only time you're ever going to need it, go to Goodwill. Go to any thrift store, Salvation Army. They have suits that they'll put out, and there won't be the best suits, and they might not have the colors you like. And the best thing you can do is try to find something that's at least your size. But the bigger piece is definitely having the dress shirt and the pants and black belt and black shoes, or brown belt and brown shoes. Those are important. And if you're a college kid, usually universities have a career services office, and they usually do an event about twice a year where you can go to places like JCPenney or Kohl's or any of these big box stores that also sell suits, and they do a student night. Usually you get half off of your entire purchase. They have people there that will measure you and pick out a suit that fits your needs. I actually got a suit at one of these once that was machine washable, so I didn't have to worry about dry cleaning, which was pretty awesome. But that was just a basic standard black suit, and it didn't last all that long, maybe a year or two, but I only wore it 3 times, so win-win. It was about $100. So we've got you dressed. How do you do the interview? Well, first thing you need to do is you got to practice taking interviews. So like I mentioned before, career services, if you're in college, they'll help you do mock interviews. Go to career fairs and just talk with all the different people at the different booths and pretend that you're actually interviewing for a position with them. And sometimes they'll even let you do a mock interview. If you're not in college, there's usually an employment office in most cities, or at least in larger cities. They'll offer things like resume review, interviews, things of that nature, to get you ready, to give you all the real big tips on how to interview. And I highly recommend you practice, and you practice a lot, because if you don't, you're going to go in being really nervous, not really thinking about what they're going to ask, not really understanding how you should answer a lot of things. And those kind of mock interviews will really help you get more comfortable. And don't do a mock interview with your friends, because you're already comfortable with your friends, you're comfortable with your family. If you have to ask maybe a teacher, say, hey, could you help me out? I'd really like to do a mock interview. A lot of teachers are willing to help out with that kind of stuff. Advisors, folks that aren't the usual people you talk to. That way you still have that feeling of nervousness and you don't really know what they're going to say or how they're going to act, but it's a less stressful situation than an actual interview. What are some of the questions they're going to ask? Well, for IT roles, a lot of times it's, give us a time where you've worked with X, Y, or Z product, or tell us a little bit more about what you've done in VMware, or how comfortable are you with Azure admin portals, And they're going to gauge a lot from the way you answer. If you answer and you kind of ramble and go off on tangents and don't really answer the question directly, they're going to feel like you maybe don't know as much as you put on your resume. You're not going to show your experience. Another reason to practice. Or if you answer something with, what's the best way to put this? Don't lie, essentially. So let's say someone asks me a question. Hey, what do you know about Pascal? I don't know anything. That's my answer. I don't know anything about it. I know it exists. Cool. But that's the end of it. And that's okay. If you don't know the answer to something, don't try to come up with an answer. Just say, I don't know, but I know where I can go to start looking that up. And sometimes they'll ask questions like, how would you troubleshoot this issue on this SQL server that's attached to this web device? And you can go through, you can say, well, I do standard troubleshooting to make sure everything's online, and you could describe kind of how you've done those troubleshooting steps before. And then when you go, and then if I've done all that, then I'll reference documentation that you all should have at your organization, or if that documentation's been outdated, I'll check and see who wrote it or who most recently added to it, and see if they know who I could talk to get some more information. If it's a really technical thing, then you can start saying stuff like, well, I'd Google it, blah, 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 blah. Show that you're willing to use the tools, especially when you don't know the answer. That's a big one. Yeah. Oh, and another thing you should be doing when you're practicing your interviews is be thinking about what kind of questions you want to ask a employer when they say, do you have any questions for us? Because this is where you get to understand a little bit more of what you're getting into before you get into it. So things that people usually don't ask about, but they should, is what's the on-call status like? Is there on-call? Is there rotation? What kind of compensation comes with that? Get that information up front. If you're possibly looking to relocate, ask about any sort of relocation budget that's available for you in the form of either, hey, we'll pay for a U-Haul, or we'll give you a $5,000 furniture credit so you can just sell everything you've got to move out. Are they going to cover any travel expenses? Are there any stipends for, if you're going to have to be available after hours, are they going to pay for your cell phone usage? How are they going to try and contact you? Is that built into my salary? Those kind of questions, ask about the salary. Ask about what kind of stuff they do for leveling up, for skilling up yourself. So, hey, I've been in the job for 6 months. What do you do to keep your employees growing and getting better at the job? Things like that. Those are the kind of questions you need to be asking the potential employer so that you know what you're getting into, whether or not you want to take an offer if they make it. And that's kind of the really big parts of an interview, is showing that either you know when to say I don't know, or you know how to explain yourself in a clear and concise manner that doesn't kind of meander. Not a lot of IT interviews that I've been in have there been a lot of questions like, what's your greatest strength? What's your biggest weakness? I've not been asked those questions a lot. Maybe they get brought up a lot more in the corporate world. I can't speak to that because I've never really done a corporate interview. So, be thinking about those different kinds of questions. Look some up online, Google interview questions for IT professionals. You're going to see a whole bunch of different lists for all sorts of different things, but they're really going to focus a lot on showing that you have the experience you said you have on your resume, describing situations that you encountered when you worked in different locations, things like that. And then they're going to judge a little bit more based off your answers, as opposed to asking you things like, how do you do high stress situations? They usually do ask that one, but they're going to watch you answer those questions and kind of take in your reaction and how your body language and things like that kind of stand out. Sometimes interviews are virtual these days. I've done quite a few of those. This is a really big one. People watch for your eye movements a lot when you're doing these kind of virtual interviews. How your posture, what you're wearing when, in your basically your comfortable area. So that's kind of a big deal. Yeah, I think that's really about it. So just remember, dress appropriately, suit, khakis and a polo. Suit and tie is the best though. There are tons of guides out there about what color suit to wear, what type of tie to wear, things like that. And again, I wish I could talk to the other side, but basically professional attire is what I should say. There are professional attire for everyone in the world. I can only talk about suits. I wish I could give more information from the other side, but I wear suits. And then, yeah, just be ready for questions. Practice, practice, practice. Go to your career services office. Go to your city employment office. Ask for help on interviewing. Have them look over your resume. Have them tell you about any good deals on where to go get clothes if you need them, because they are expensive, and I get that. And I kind of hate it, but that's just how the things are. Let me know what your tips and tricks are for taking interviews. Do you just randomly apply for jobs every once in a while so you can have an interview that's a stressful situation, whether or not you're going to want to take the job or not? Or, tell us about your most favorite interview question you've been asked and the worst interview question you've been asked. Let's aggregate some of those in the comments down below and see what we got. So I think that's about it. We're going to wrap up this whole little mini series, because after this point, if you get the interview, you're either going to get the job or you're not going to get the job. And remember, it's not the end of the world if you don't get the job. You're going to hear no a lot. It's just part of the whole employment thing. There's lots of people looking for jobs right now, and there's lots of people who have a ton of experience. They're better than me. They're better than plenty of other IT people. So they're going to get the job before you, and you're going to get that wonderful little email or letter that says, thank you for applying, but we've decided to go in a different direction for this position at this time, yada, 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 yada. But don't let it get you down. That's why you should apply to as many things as possible. And with that, we'll see you in the next one.